Welcome to the Breakthrough Advisor Podcast. In this podcast, we inspire advisors with ideas and pathways to break through barriers and build a thriving retirement income business. We will interview innovative technology developers, business leaders, and successful advisors, then help you organize and execute these ideas to move your business forward.
Hello and welcome to the Breakthrough Advisor. I am your host, Eric Johnson. Today I am speaking with Don Quante. He is the principal of Simplicity Asset-Based Long-Term Care. Hello, Don. How are you?
Hey, Eric. I'm doing good, man.
It's so exciting to talk to you. We were able to speak a few minutes before we started this recording, and you've got way more energy than somebody should for a Wednesday afternoon.
Oh, man. Well, it's fun being in this business, man.
Yeah, no, I'm excited to talk to you. And I know that you really focus on asset-based long-term care, and we're going to get into that in just a moment. But before we even start that, I'd like to hear just a little bit about your history. How did you get started in this profession, and kind of where did you start from?
Yeah, so, man, that goes back 37 years ago, Eric. I was recruited off of a college campus to join a little insurance company by the name of MetLife. I like to think of that as a practice company. And what's kind of funny is how I got into it. Like I said, I was recruited off of a college campus, had no idea what I was getting myself into. And, so I plodded along, I followed the training, and we got some good training. But when it came to prospecting and client acquisition, they really hadn't figured it out, they hadn't cracked the code. And so, I stumbled along for the better part of 16, 17 years. And then one day I woke up and said, this is crazy, man. I'm working evening hours. I'm seeing people on Saturdays. There's got to be a better way. I mean, I was making okay money, a couple $100,000 a year. But then I thought, you know what? True definition of insanity, I heard, was doing the same thing over and over again.
Exactly.
Different results, right?
Yep.
So I literally quit on a Friday and started my own retail financial planning business on a Monday.
Wow.
Concept, Eric, was real simple. Look, there's nobody in the St. Louis marketplace at that time that was talking about holistic planning around the topic of long-term care. So the question is, what happens if you get sick? How do you pay for your care in the most tax-efficient, cost-effective way? And so we became experts on that and started holding educational events. We then shifted to radio. We had television commercials, and literally overnight, our business went from a $200,000 just getting by planning firm to in excess of $1 million. And I'm happy to say 18 years in a row, we've never generated less than $1 million of new commissions. In most years, it was closer to 2 million, right?
Jeez.
So, so it's it's kind of funny. It's a rags to riches story, but it's true. And it's off of something that everybody else is stepping over, this whole issue of long-term care and how you plan for it.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, congratulations. I mean, that is a tremendous feat. You and I were talking before the podcast and spoke about a few things, and you know that I'm a coach and consultant for advisors, and I speak with advisors quite often. And to have that kind of success, and obviously it wasn't overnight because you had a good foundation and you worked your tail off, obviously, but to make that switch and realize what was missing, not many advisors can do that on a dime. So congratulations to you and your team and everybody who helped support you through that process. I'd like to hear a little bit more about that later in the podcast, but I want to check a statistic with you, or a fact, if you will. I'm using air quotes on a podcast, which is very ineffective, but a fact that I've heard, and that is that 70% of all of us as adults are going to need long-term care at some point. Is that about right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, and I think the statistics are even more alarming when you think about Alzheimer's and other dementias. The most recent statistic regarding Alzheimer's from the Alzheimer's Association is that every 65 seconds, somebody's diagnosed with Alzheimer's.
Jeez.
And when you consider that that's just one of 70 different types of dementia, you got front temporal lobe dementia, you've got alcohol-induced dementia, vitamin B deficiency syndrome dementia, and it goes on and on. And to think that that's the case, I mean, as a baby boomer myself, it scares the bejesus out of me,
Yeah.
thinking that,
Yeah.
man, you start thinking about, hey, where did I put my keys down at? And, the story, if you talk to the doctor, is if you forget where you put your keys, that's all right. A lot of us do that in our 50s and 60s. If you forget what the keys are for, totally different story, right? So,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, okay. I'm in my 40s and I will walk into a room and not remember why I went in there. So I don't know
right.
about anybody else, but that does scare me. And I'm a pretty concrete thinker, Don. I know that we haven't, known each other for very long, but the way I look at this is that if my wife and I go out to dinner with another couple, roughly 3 of us at that table might need long-term care. Will most likely
Yeah.
need long-term care at some point. And that does scare the snot out of me, because as a guy, I'm like, it's not going to be me. But then I look around the table, I'm like, okay, well, they're kind of healthier than I am, so it might be me. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Jamie
Exactly.
Christmas.
Well, and one of the things we do, I think I mentioned before, is I'm the author of a couple of best-selling books. The first one is "Don't Go Broke in a Nursing Home." The
Mm,
second one is "Tax-Free Money for Long-Term Care." And one of the things we do as we work with other advisors is we create a geographic, specific, and exclusive edition of that book. We actually challenged the other advisor to rewrite several chapters that will be meaningful to the residents in
mm,
their area, because to your point, you've got you go to dinner with your wife and another couple, and 3 of the 4 are going to need care. Nobody ever stops to think, well, if you're in Topeka, Kansas, the cost of that care is considerably different than if you're on the West Coast or the East Coast.
absolutely.
So, if you're in Connecticut, you could be talking about 10 to 12 grand a month
Mm-hmm.
to stay out of the nursing home, because everybody wants to be at home, right? Particularly, because of COVID now. I mean, nobody wants to go to a nursing home. I mean,
Yeah.
they liken that to, absolute death sentence.
Mm-hmm.
Now, fortunately, just a few nursing homes across the country where a large number of people died. But at the end of the day, people don't, but baby boomers for sure, Eric, don't want to go to the nursing home. So, so what we try to do is educate people to understand, what's this stuff cost?
Mm-hmm.
And there's really 3 very important questions that agents need to get into a habit of asking their clients. And if they just did this, whether they did anything else or not, they would really be benefiting their clients. And it's real simple. I might say something like this, Eric, God forbid if you were to get sick and need long-term care, but if that were to happen, where would you want to receive your care? And 84% of the people statistically are going to say at home.
Mm-hmm.
And then let's say you were in Connecticut, Eric, with that costing 10 grand a month to stay at home, in 2 short years, Eric, you could go through $250,000. Which asset, because you got other assets, I know you don't have a plan for long-term care, which asset would you liquidate first? And then let's say they say their IRA, which is not unusual for baby boomers,
Mm-hmm.
because that's where most of their money is at. We would say, well, let me ask you, Eric, if there was a better way to use just some of your IRA and have it create unlimited long-term care for you and your wife, is that something we should look at? And Eric, if the listeners, these advisors that are listening to this podcast, simply did that, their world would change as it pertains to long-term care. Advisors think the clients don't want to talk about it, but it's only because the advisors haven't couched the questions properly.
Mm-hmm.
That's my take anyway.
Yeah, and well, it's so funny because my next question to you was going to be, I know that you are a lead generation expert, but that specific tip right there tells me why. I don't need to ask that question, but I will ask a follow-up question. What else are you doing and helping advisors with that makes you that lead generation expert besides just that one tip right there you already gave?
Yeah, so that's really, I would call that more of a best practice.
Mm-hmm.
That's during the client meeting. So at a website called $1,000,000advisor.com, we work with top IMOs, like InsureMark. They're one of our favorite firms, and so if an advisor is with InsureMark, they can get access to $1,000,000advisor.com free of charge. Now,
Wow.
if an advisor doesn't have a relationship with one of our sister companies, it's going to cost them $5,500 to download my material, but they can get it for free if they're with InsureMark.
Mm.
What's there? Everything from soup to nut. It's a how-to marketing system. So we'll teach them how to actually market using radio, television ads, which when you talk about lead generation, I talked to a guy just before we got on the podcast with you, and he said, Don, he said, last weekend, he said, I ran 3 ads on the Fox News network in his town. And he said, I've got 126 requests for the book. So we had co-authored a book with him for his area.
Wow.
And so he's got a whole different issue now is, how do you follow up on 126?
Yeah. Scalability.
leads?
Holy cow.
Yeah. Yeah. So, so one of the things that, that we've done is we've used radio and television really effectively to drive large numbers of leads. And then in the system, Million Dollar Advisor, we have all of the scripts, the tools, the forms that you need. We have an opening and closing presentation. Not bragging, but I led the entire field force at One America in 2017. There's like 14,000 licensed agents there on their asset-based long-term care side of things. And I did it using television advertising and something called the crystal ball piece, which is in the Million Dollar Advisor. And it's basically a process that you take the clients through. It's an opening and a closing tool that guarantees results. I mean, the clients can't say no if you do it right. All of what we're talking about now is at milliondolaradvisor.com.
Mm-hmm.
It's found in the form of 56 hours of instructional video, me actually coaching the advisor one-on-one. We're doing this all through video, of course. So that's a little bit about it.
Okay. So let me ask you this. Your story is fantastic. Basically, rags to riches is how you framed it. And I would agree with you. You started in business, met life years and years ago, kind of got that basic small foundation, but then exploded into what you have today. Now, every advisor out there that listens to this podcast has disclaimers, past results are not indicative of future results, so on and so forth. Everybody knows that. However, you can help duplicate the process and the program that you've put in place and been successful with. So if I'm an advisor listening to this, my question to you would be, why would I want to do asset-based LTC? Asset-based long-term care, for those that are wondering what LTC means. Why would I want to do that if I don't focus on that already? I already have enough on my plate.
Yeah, so that's a really good question. And what I found by swimming upstream and advertising for people that are interested in protecting their assets from long-term care, that we found something they all had in common, and that was that they had something to protect.
Mm-hmm.
So if you wanted to qualify people, you would run ads based on television, radio, different direct mail, based on long-term care, with the ideal that it's not going to cost you as much. You aren't going to have to compete with anybody else because you'll be in blue ocean. So that's the first thing. It's not going to cost as much. Second thing is that when you get in front of them, the quality of the people and how much assets they have are probably right in your wheelhouse. And last but not least, in 2017, the last year I practiced as a full-time advisor. For every dollar of asset-based long-term care that we put on the books, we added another $3 to ancillary sales like assets under management.
Wow.
And indexed annuities. So if somebody told me, Don, I want to sell more indexed annuity, I'd say quit advertising about what you want to sell and start talking about what people care about.
Mm-hmm.
There was a study that was done by Ken Deichwald. Now, this goes back a few years, but for those of you who don't know, he's the guy who wrote the book Age Wave back in the 80s. He also is the creator of the Age Wave Lab. They've done some amazing research on the aging process, and more specifically, how baby boomers are going to act in the future. And in the study, they asked a question: what keeps the baby boomers up at night? And it was interesting. They found that the two things that were most important to the baby boomers were they were concerned about running out of income during their lifetime, So, Eric, all of the listeners of your podcast right now, here go, well, I got that one covered. Checkbox. I could just check that off because I know how to do retirement planning.
Mm-hmm.
But here's the one that was startling. The second thing that kept them up at night was the fear that their children would warehouse them away in a nursing home. In other words, the issue of long-term care.
Yeah.
So why is it that if we've got, 8,900 baby boomers turning 65 each and every day, and they're concerned about these two things, most of the advisors on this podcast are only checking the box on the one, when the other one's as important. And if you're smart and you're stealthy, you can advertise. Again, I've got all of the pieces that all they need to do is plug into our system. They can do that and have their phone ring off the hook. If they're halfway decent, it's pretty easy transition from having a conversation protecting your assets from long-term care to income for life planning, which is what we call retirement planning. So hopefully that helps.
Yeah, absolutely. Don, obviously you care about the advisors that are out there. You care about people's future plans as far as long-term care. And I know that you've been teaching and training people for a very long time. I want to shift gears though, because with that much concern for other people, you've got to have a pretty solid foundation around you. What are you doing when you're not working? What's going on family-wise and fun-wise? What do you do, Don?
Yeah, so it's real simple, man. I got three great children. We've got three great grandkids, wonderful wife.
Nice.
We spend a lot of time at the swimming pool in our backyard, or we also have a place a little bit west of St. Louis at Lake Ozark. We do enjoy boating, but quite frankly, other than those two things, you find me here in the office working with agents. We're doing a lot of work with advisors of InsureMark. They're an amazing organization, but yeah, that's it. I fall into that category, Eric, of being pretty boring outside the office setting and outside the industry. I'm clearly what you would call a workaholic.
Yeah. Yep. I get that. And most workaholics have had pretty good mentors during their life or people to show them the ropes. What is the best advice you've ever received? I know you give a ton and you do a lot of teaching, like we said, but what's the best advice you've ever received?
Well, that list would be long, and I had the fortune of working with some really great people. A lot of them were top of the table advisors that I met along the way. But it's probably my very first boss, and it was in a bicycle shop. I was 14 years old, and he said, it's real simple. You just got to treat people the way that you want to be treated and how you believe they would want to be treated. And, it's sort of that golden, rule: don't do things to people that you wouldn't want done to you. But I heard something at top of the table that literally changed my world and my perception on this wonderful business that we have called the insurance business. And there could be some advisors who are still working evening hours and they're working with young families at night. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, but you will limit your income possibilities by doing that. And the guy said this. He got up and unfortunately, I would love to give him credit for this, but I don't remember his first name. But I remember what he said. He said, "I'm going to give you guys some advice that you probably haven't heard before." And he said, "Dawn is prettier than dusk." And I thought, well, that's great. I flew all the way here, spent all this money to go to a MDRT meeting, and he tells me
he gave you a fortune cookie.
Prettier than dusk. Yeah. But then, Eric, he went on to say something really important. He said, look, 70% of all goods and services worldwide are sold before 12 noon. And I thought, wait a second, man, I have a 6 o'clock appointment scheduled almost every day and an 8 o'clock appointment. People are tired. It's late.
Yeah.
This just doesn't make sense. And if you only work that marketplace, younger families, you're seeing people at 5, 6, 7, 8 o'clock at night. The reality of the whole thing is that you can never get scale that way. And so, so what it did for me was to say, hey, I need to shift markets. And that was in, believe it or not, in July of 2001 when I made the decision to go independent and start this business centered around long-term care.
All right, Don, obviously that advice given to you, now you've passed it on to our entire listening audience, but I'm going to ask you for one more. For all the advisors that are listening to this and saying, okay, well, this is great. I'm glad that he's had success. I'll definitely think about this. What advice would you give them that aren't incorporating long-term care or the conversation, or maybe they kind of farm it out to somebody else because they just don't think they can specialize in it?
Yeah, so here's the thing. If you're working with InsureMark, we have as an extension to them, Simplicity Asset-Based LTC has 13 employees. We got a sales desk where we can help you with those cases. You simply send the fact find in. We'll do all of the heavy lifting for you, get you up to speed to where you can learn to to help your clients. I will also say that in my heart of hearts, I believe you owe it to your clients to have the conversation with them. And if you're working with InsureMark, you can get access to milliondolaradvisor.com. At that site, there is a tool called the crystal ball piece. And what it will do is it will help you have that opening conversation with existing clients in a way that you would not have expected. That's very low key, and you'll have about 70% of the existing clients will move forward with you. I know that sounds like an outlandish statement to make, but that is fact. For those who don't move forward with you, it's okay, because you're going to have them sign a disclosure form that's built into our tool that says, hey, look, my advisor sat down with me. I decided I knew more than they did, and I don't want to solve this problem with asset-based long-term care. And you have them sign it. So one way or the other, you got things covered in your file. The reality is that plaintiffs' attorneys are beginning to sue advisors in record numbers for failure to discuss the issue of long-term care. You don't want to be on that end of that kind of suit. So,
yeah.
So my recommendation is, even if you're not going to dive in and do a bunch of advertising on this, you owe it to your existing clients to have that conversation with them.
Yeah, absolutely. Don, we are low on time. Unfortunately, I've had a blast. I appreciate your energy. I appreciate all you're doing for advisors out there, because it's a trickle-down effect. If you're helping these advisors, they're helping families. And as someone who has had families go through dementia and Alzheimer's and the devastation that it can have on finances and just the entire family, not going to tell the whole story, but I had some of my family members, they actually lost the homestead family farm because of an Alzheimer's situation that they didn't have long-term care for. And so they basically lost everything due to how the state had to take care of it. And that was devastating. And it was very sad because it's someplace that I really enjoyed visiting and can't do that anymore. So I love the fact that you're doing this. This is so, so important. Don, again, thank you so much. I appreciate all the time you've given us, but I'm going to ask you for one more thing. If advisors are listening to this and this is the first time they've met you, what can you give them?
Yeah,
everybody likes something free, right?
Well, hey, you know what? In the spirit of educating people and helping advisors, what I can do, Eric, is for anybody who would be willing to call InsureMark, let me give you the number. It's 800-752-0207. I will have them send you, our friends at InsureMark will be happy to send you a copy of my best-selling book, Don't Go Broke in a Nursing Home.
Wow.
And in that book, we talk, Eric, about the 5 different ways you could fund asset-based long-term care, how to use your IRA, how to use an annuity and create tax-free money, and it goes on and on. It's a great read, and heck, the book's valued at $19.95. So if you want to buy it, you can go to Amazon, but why not call our friends at InsureMark? That's 800-752-0207. And then when you're talking to them and requesting a free copy of the book, ask them what you'd have to do to qualify to get access to our training site, milliondolaradvisor.com. Because again, you could, advisor listening to this could go to my site and pay $5,500 to me, but InsureMark has a way where they can provide that, Eric, free of charge for anybody who would be happy to call them and request a copy of the book.
Man, that is so generous. Thank you, Don, so much for that. The book is a very good start, and for all you advisors, the start is great, but how about a very strong finish? And that would be getting involved and getting to those resources so you can learn how to implement this in your own business. Don, I want to thank you so much again for spending time with me on the podcast today.
All right.
And for all of you listening, thank you so much for tuning in and listening to the Breakthrough Advisor podcast. If you have not subscribed to the podcast yet, please click the subscribe now button below. This way, when we come out with a new podcast, it'll show up directly on your listening device. This makes it much easier to share these podcasts with your colleagues. Again, thanks for listening today. For everyone at InsureMark, this is Eric Johnson reminding you to live your best day every day. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Breakthrough Advisor podcast. Click the subscribe button below to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of InsureMark. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only.